That's good. That's good because I know I had some fears in going through my divorce process. And I want to ask you about maybe what were some fears that you faced? Because I know for me, my biggest fear was even though I knew my marriage was over years before it actually ended, unfortunately, I
Yeah.
was fearful of judgment from the church.
Yeah.
I was fearful that God wouldn't bless me on the other end, that if I ended this, will God be finished with me? Um, will it be, hell and high water to pay because I went through a divorce? And also just the fear of from what I was already doing, like at the time, I was rebranded. I was doing another, podcast at the time. And I was thinking, man, here it is. My marriage is falling apart and I'm doing this show every week,
Right.
so I think my fear was also not also putting everything into practice that I taught,
Yes.
and that came with some fear within itself, not so much of being a hypocrite, but actually opening the door to my own heart because I had personal issues that I haven't addressed. I was fearful of that, right?
Yeah.
So can you give me some of your fears and going through your divorce process as a man?
Absolutely. So, and I think those are great points that you made, especially if you are in the church or came up in the church. There is this expectation that I would say oftentimes is unrealistic, just from the standpoint of, we're taught to keep this high standard, which we are capable of keeping. Okay, let me say that it's not unattainable,
Mhm.
but we really aren't given an outlet where we can discuss it if we're having challenges with it. If you aren't living, to perfection, where can you go to talk about it, especially as a man?
Mhm.
And so that's definitely a very real thing. I dealt with that myself. One of the other big things for me was just being a failure. I've been successful at almost everything that my hands have touched. I was successful in athletics. I've been successful in business and in my career. And I picked this woman to marry, and now I'm failing at this. And
Mhm.
so I didn't want to concede to a failure, even though there was a lot of things going on that was not right. And so one of the other things, I think, along with that I dealt with was just, as you mentioned, dealing with God. How do you reconcile that? Is it an issue of faith, not having enough faith, or all those types of things? You deal with that condemnation because there are some people that will tell you if you really have faith, then faith enough the Lord can do it. Well, the Lord can do it, but one of the things that God showed me is that we cannot violate, and God will not violate anybody else's will. He gave us all free will. So you can hope and pray and want to do something yourself, but if you don't have a partner that's in agreement with you, you can't do it. It's impossible for you to do it, and if they aren't open for God to touch and change their life, then it's not going to be done. God will not violate their free will. And so there's a lot of things like that aren't talked about enough, I believe. But I think men need to know and people need to know as you're going through that situation. Do the best that you can, be a person of integrity,
Mhm.
but it takes two to tango, right? And
Mhm.
so, and God is not going to be accountable for any of our mess. He's not going to violate anybody's free will. And really the result of the marriage and whether successful or not comes down to the two people that are in that covenant partnership. And if two don't agree, how can they walk together? God never called us to submit to abuse, whether that's verbal, physical, or mental. And if you, as a man, we typically don't say, "Oh, we're being abused," but if you're with somebody who's not talking to you right, who's not supportive, and other things, that's not God's heart for you. You're not supposed to submit to that and just hang in there and just take anything, be a doormat or whatever the case may be. So, but I would say those are the main things for me is just, dealing with God, the judgment, and then mainly just being a failure myself. The condemnation that I put myself under if
Mhm.
I would not stay married.
Mm, that's good, man. I appreciate the transparency because this is what it's all about transparency and helping men heal and how we can get through this process. Because I know a lot of times, um, the ladies, like I said in the intro, they have this support system, but we don't. And this is why I love this platform that we have, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that transparency. How can from a man's perspective, how does it look like going from divorce to getting out into the dating world? Because that's one of the reasons I named the show "It's Scary to Be Married," because you're going, you're coming out of a divorce, you're getting right back into this dating pool. Well, not right back, because I kind of want to talk about that as well. What was your recovery process? You know what? Let's put a pin there. What was your recovery process like before you got into dating? Let's discuss Al Gleason
Yeah.
post divorce.